So my name is Ryan Beauregard. I'm part of MAPS and Zendo Project. I am joined this evening by my colleagues Brooke, Liz, and Adam. And we're going to do it a little bit differently tonight. We're going to be a little bit more casual, and normally we have an amazing bio that we read off, but I'd love for everybody to introduce themselves, and I'll just start off and kind of model it a little bit. Yeah, Ryan Beauregard. I live in Boulder, Colorado. I've been working with MAPS for about 4 years in the Zendo Project department. Been doing this psychedelic peer support thing and volunteering with Zendo for about 8, maybe even 9 years. And I come to this work through my own interest and experience in working with kids, rites of passage, and my own big and hang on, let me stop the screen share for a moment. My own big and otherwise crazy spun out psychedelic journey that my community helped me home from about 13 years ago. And this has inspired me and connected with this amazing community ever since. And it's been something near and dear to my heart. And we're excited to share our passions and our experience of this work with you all tonight. So yeah, who wants to step in next and say hello?
I can start. Hi, everybody. My name is Liz Willis, and I'm honored to be here today with people that I hold in high esteem. I've learned a lot from Ryan and Brooke and Adam for many years on the Zendo on the playa and at multiple events internationally and nationally. So I am an ER nurse. I have been for about a decade, and a recently graduated psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. I work in San Francisco, and I first learned of the Zendo at my first MAPS conference in 2013. And I began to volunteer for Zendo ever since. I didn't know that you could combine nursing with the playa, with community service, with psychedelics. I come from Grateful Dead, Fish in the beginning of the electronic dance music scene in the early 90s. And Zendo is all the things that I never had access to. And I truly believe in the transformative power to heal one another and our planet together. So since joining the Zendo, I've also had the opportunity to become a part of Fireside, thanks to the invitation of Adam. And I'm currently serving in a volunteer supervisor role with people who are doing harm reduction on a crisis support line via text and phone. So those are some incredible things I've had chances to do so far. I'm a graduate of CIIS in 2017, and I'm currently a TA for the Integrative Psychiatry Institute's new psychedelic therapy training program. Thank you.
I'm gonna have a showdown with you, Adam, to go after Liz's spectacular introduction. Damn, Liz, you've been doing some things. That was amazing to hear everything all in a row like that. Yeah, wow. Making me feel like I shouldn't even be on this panel. What an honor. I was realizing too that, you know, all of us, Ryan, Adam, and Liz, I have had a chance to travel internationally to do harm reduction with as well. I didn't really fully realize that when we were preparing for this, but like I guess all of us, I found my way to Zendo, I think like 8 or 9 years ago now. I happened to be camping at Burning Man in a place called Fractal Nation, and Zendo's first year was there, and my tent was just right next to the Zendo. And I have a strong lifelong Buddhist meditation practice in the Theravadan tradition. So I saw it at the time, the cardboard had Zendo painted on it. And I thought, well, I need to do some meditation because Burning Man's overwhelming. And so I went in there and I met someone named Lene, who then became a friend. And then years later, everyone here, and have created space to volunteer for Zendo ever since, because also I've had experiences and watched my community all throughout life have experiences where we needed a Zendo and there was not one. And so how to sort of build that for people moving forward so that they didn't have to face some of the harm that was done in events for, you know, probably eons before. I live in Los Angeles. My background is psychotherapy. I'm a psychotherapist and have been for 14 years now. I did not realize before I happened to be camping next to the Zendo that psychedelics and psychotherapy had anything in common. Prior to meeting MAPS through the Zendo, I didn't talk about my experiences with psychedelics, certainly not with my coworkers. Now I'm primarily a psychedelic psychotherapist, and I work here in Los Angeles at a company that I co-founded with some colleagues, where we do ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, psychedelic integration work, and we host the MDMA-assisted clinical trials site for MAPS MDMA for PTSD studies. So it's really changed my life. And like Liz said, it's just an honor. I'm so excited to see everybody from all across the world. Shout out to the Kiwis. We just finished training a New Zealand cohort in MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. So MAPS is coming your way too. Looking forward to speaking with you all today, sharing my experience.
Awesome. It's so good to see and hear you all again. After all, we've like worked together in person Zendo events and stuff like that. So yes, I'm Adam Rubin. Currently I'm located in California. And I've been with the Zendo since 2015, attending most of the events that Zendo has done since then, in the capacity of sitter, lead, and supervisor. Yeah, I've been pretty devoted to the path of psychedelic risk reduction from that point forward. So Zendo was kind of my doorway into that. Alongside that work, I had worked for many years as a crisis counselor at an awesome organization in Oregon called Whitebird. And then more recently, I've taken all of the psychedelic risk reduction work and my crisis line work and merged it together to co-found the Fireside Project. So if you haven't heard of it, check it out, firesideproject.org. We offer phone or text support to anyone experiencing a psychedelic or after they've experienced a psychedelic. So definitely check that out. We have an app. It's a way to receive harm reduction in the moment when you need it. Yeah, that's a bit about me and my background. I think that's it for me right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. It's so, yeah, it's so nice to be here with not just colleagues and heroes of mine, but also to be able to call you all my friends and my community. And that's really, yeah, that's what we're wanting to do tonight. You know, I want to say we just finished up a really amazing conversation last night that got posted, I think just this afternoon. I believe it went live, which is the recording of this series that we do called Entheogeneration. I'm going to put it here in our chat right now. You can see after we wrap up here, this conversation that we had, and the topic for that was community as sacrament. So the idea of, you know, psychedelics often are sacrament, but maybe community is perhaps, and this is what we were asserting in this conversation yesterday, is that perhaps as powerful as psychedelics are, and as much as they may hold a true key and potential for healing, that without community, they might not go as far as they would on their own. So this thing here tonight is jumping a little bit into community and talking about how we've all applied these principles of peer support over the years in our lives, from everything from nursing to peer support in crisis to psychedelic therapy. And so I'm going to start off by just going through, for those of you that are brand new to Zendo Project and the work we do, just a really basic and brief educational presentation on our principles and peer support. And love any of my colleagues to join in as it feels appropriate. In some ways, we've got, I'll just say it this way, we've got so many amazing videos already online about these presentations. I don't want to spend too much time focusing. I'd really like to encourage this entire audience to either in the chat, to continue to meet each other and be part of this conversation, but also in the Q&A. Please give us the questions that are going to help feed this conversation, because that's what we're really here to do. Is we've presented this education, we want to present it, but we really want to dive in and see what's on your minds, what's in your hearts. How do we deepen? How do we continue to nurture and grow this community? So with that being said, I'm gonna do this little slideshow for as long as it takes, hopefully under 15 minutes, but I'm gonna share my screen here and we're gonna pop in and talk a little bit about this. And as it feels appropriate, come on in and let's play and let's get into this Q&A. So let's rewind and talk a little bit about Burning Man. That's why we're here. It's really how Zendo was birthed. There's a longer history. Rick Doblin was working alongside the Black Rock Rangers for quite a while, as well as Annie Oak and some of the other amazing peer support specialists who'd been doing this work for probably 10 or 15 years before that. And then at some point we decided, hey, let's launch this as a gift back to Burning Man. So here are 10 principles of Burning Man. We've taken, I believe it's Wickham's 10 symbols of Burning Man and put it in this fun little wheel. I love wheels. There's something about like the cyclical nature of all of this. And then, looking at this kind of similar thing through the idea of our lens of Zendo Project and that kind of middle ring of the 4 principles: safe space, sitting, not guiding, talking somebody through and not down, and where appropriate, reframing bad as difficult. And so around the very edge are some of the things that we have put up in the Zendo or reminded folks of over the years: trust, presence, let go, surrender, compassion, and be open. And so this is the fun thing where I speak a million miles per hour, but I just need to read this off real quick. The materials and content of these materials are presented for educational and informational purposes only. They are not medical, psychological, or legal or other professional advice, and they're not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you have specific questions about your health or healthcare decisions, seek the advice of a licensed healthcare professional. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you read, heard, or received in the content or materials. If you think someone you've come into contact with may have a medical emergency, call a doctor, go to the emergency department, or call 911 immediately. The MAP Zendo Project does not offer a guarantee or warranty, nor any representation regarding the use, results, or reliability of the information obtained in these materials. Reliance on any information provided by the Zendo Project MAPS employees, volunteers, affiliates, agents, or assigns is solely at your own risk. MAPS employees, MAPS volunteers, or MAPS members companies shall not be held liable for any improper or incorrect use of these materials and assumes no responsibility for their use by any individual or group. All right, enough of that.
You practiced that a lot, haven't you?
It's come out a few times. So, this is an interesting piece here, this harm reduction bit. I'll say, and I think Adam and I have had this conversation over the years, but when I first came in, harm reduction was such a triggering word. I was like, why are we even using the word harm and talking about reducing it? But, maybe Liz and Brooke, maybe you can speak a little bit more to this, but what we have learned over the years is this is a very accessible term to both law enforcement, legislators and activists, and other folks in the movement. So the idea is, we're aiming to reduce negative consequences associated with drug use. We're trying to increase knowledge and awareness around the risk of drug use, and trying to create a more well-informed and conscious community. And at the end of the day, really what we'd like to do on both sides of this, whether you're pro psychedelics or against it or undecided, is really have more open and honest dialogues about drug use. So within the harm reduction, which is a giant thing that involves, there's harm reduction for drugs, but there's also harm reduction for sex and so many other things. But we are in that, harm reduction of the pie, we are that small slice of specifically psychedelics. And then an even smaller slice that within psychedelics, we are doing peer support. Because there's everything like Dance Safe, if somebody can throw that into our chat. Dance Safe does amazing education on just basically all drugs out there, as well as test kits. But I mean, just looking at psychedelics, honestly, the reality is most of the folks that do psychedelics, they take them recreational. That's certainly where I found mine. I know that we've met lots of folks. Liz even mentioned the fish and dead culture that is often where a lot of folks, including myself, first discovered psychedelics. So one of the things about psychedelics is many people don't really, or maybe adequately, understand the risk that can be associated with taking them in certain sets and settings. But the other interesting piece is
there.
Yeah, pop in.
I just want to pop in because I do think there's something about harm reduction that's very real. And I don't think just because you talk about something means that it exists, you know, and I think we all know that psychedelics aren't inherently positive all the time, that there's a real risk, and the real risk is harm, and the harm is harming your body, harming your soul, harming your relationships, harming your community. And so I hear kind of what the sort of the presentation of that, and I see it in the chat coming up of like, what can we replace that with? But I do think that, you know, it's worth calling out that like that there is shadow wherever there's light, and that ignoring the shadow doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so the reality of why people need communities like Zendo is because harm does happen. And so to me, there's something really sweet about the phrase harm reduction that sort of indicates like things can go wrong, things do go wrong, and that we're not judging anybody for it. It's not a place where you pretend like bad things didn't happen. And psychedelics are in service of looking at your shadow a lot of the time. And so there's something really valuable, I think, about how that's named even in Zendo's work.
Thanks, Brooke.
I also, yeah, my hand is up, but I instead of somebody saying, yes, you, Adam, I'll just go. So I agree. Yeah, I think that part of harm reduction is the piece you wrote on just being real, being honest about like what's actually going on here, instead of pretending that it's not going on or something isn't risky in some way. There is a movement within the harm reduction community of relabeling psychedelic harm reduction specifically as risk reduction. That psychedelics maybe aren't inherently harmful, but they do inherently carry risks. So that's another thing that I've heard used here and there.
Love it. Thanks, guys. I like that we're really, you know, and I'll say, if anything, this is the word that when I'm talking with law enforcement, they understand. They get what harm reduction is, and I think that's important to be able to use that language. So again, you know, we're talking about the big slice of drugs, the smaller slice of psychedelic drugs, and then our specific focus at Zendo Project is psychedelic support. And so, you know, what we're talking about, what we did mention is sometimes these things can create or have the potential for harmful experiences with the wrong set and setting, people being dosed unintentionally, having latent trauma come up, or fresh stuff that really needs maybe more grounding before we start stirring it up in the psychedelic headspace. So, you know, just acknowledging that these states can be unstable, they can be erratic. Sometimes with folks with, you know, just pre-existing mental health conditions can result in adverse effects, including psychotic breaks. So just something to really be aware of, you know, doing that research of where does that come up. Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
One way that I sometimes like to summarize, like, what are the risks of psychedelics and what is it that we're providing as risk reduction, is that most classic psychedelics like LSD or mushrooms, they're not physically damaging. Like, you can't die from taking too much LSD, for example, physiologically speaking, but psychologically speaking, it can be traumatic. It can be, you know, all sorts of things can come out of that. So that's part of how I sometimes summarize the risks, psychological risks.
Yeah, amen. Thank you. And you know, this last point, that if we do have support, there is a method to help reduce or prevent or even transform difficult psychedelic experiences. I think for any of us that have had these experiences, it's not all just, rainbows and unicorns, that there are some challenging either self-reflections or reflections of the world around us. And I think for all of us that are on this call, or at least have had some hand in Zendo Project, we've seen where just having somebody to be a witness or a hand on the shoulder, or be able to get you that blanket or acknowledge what you're going through in these spaces can be so transformative, as opposed to being there in isolation or the absence of friends or a good supportive team.
Like when you could say, hey, to someone you trust, are those rainbows and unicorns supposed to be covered in blood? And they can say, yeah, totally, it's fine.
Right. Just like is that a police officer coming at us right now? Sometimes the answer is yes, that's absolutely a police officer coming at us right now. Or if we're at Burning Man, it's like, yeah, that's a person dressed as a sexy cop right now, and they're getting ready to perform a strip show for all their friends. So even though it looks like a police officer, it's not actually an officer in uniform, and just being able to make those distinctions can be so helpful in that headspace. So here's our gentleman, Humphrey Osmond, who actually coined the term psychedelic. And I just love this quote because I feel like it's so appropriate. To fathom hell or soar angelic, just take a pinch of psychedelic. So difficult experiences. We're talking about, in our experience of Zendo Project, we're helping this guy. If anybody remembers this amazing episode of Family Guy, Stewie is here trying to trade his tie-dye t-shirt for a grilled cheese sandwich. He's having a hard time, but he's able to speak, he's able to ambulate, he's breathing, he's conscious. So we're going to dive a little bit more into this, but what we're sharing for all of our veterans as well as our first timers is there's a time and a place for psychedelic support. And to get to that place, we want to make sure that the other medical and or psychological issues have been dealt with first before we go into trying to give somebody the support that they need. So some contributing factors to difficult psychedelic experiences can be mental and psychological. So it's, our set, which refers to our kind of, in this case, I would actually say that we need to make a little change here, because I think of setting as our internal, I think I'm having just a little back and forth. Set actually is our mindset. Am I right? Can I get some Adam? Yeah, thank you. And setting is our physical space, right?
Set is, internal, setting is external. Yeah.
Thank you. So the set, like, what is our mindset? What is our headspace? Do we have does this person have mental health conditions, a history of trauma? Are there negative stimuli currently happening outside? And then I think this is one of the biggest pieces, especially within the Burning Man world and festivals. Has there been enough sleep? Are the medications being taken? Is there nutrition? I think all four of us have seen the times where folks have gotten off their medication to get high, or gotten off their medication because getting off their medication makes them feel high at festivals. And it can be somewhat problematic when that's what somebody is relying on for their mental health to then pop off medication.
I might be a little nitpicky here, but I think stimuli would go into setting. Stimuli.
Into setting, yeah. Let's pop into that. I think that's our next one. So this is situational. Talking about the events and situations, major life stressors and circumstances, major life events, physical health. So, when I'm thinking of major life events, I'm thinking of like divorce, a death in the family, losing a job, things like that are not necessarily, I know that some folks would maybe argue with this, that's maybe the perfect time to take psychedelics. But in some of what we've seen in the Zendo, it can be really helpful to ground those things into a more realized place, to really understand what people are going for, instead of just being like, I don't know what to do with myself, and popping a few tabs of acid or a bunch of mushrooms in their mouth. We've often seen the hardship of that rather than the ease. Brooke?
Or at least to know that that's what you're doing, you know, because I might fall into the camp of like, this is a good time to do psychedelics because I can get caught up in my mind patterns that aren't helping me through difficult life events. But I think it can make a difference if you're taking psychedelics to make it go away so you can forget about it, because that's not what happens usually. But if you're saying, I'm going in because I'm going in with this, it can make all the difference. Even if where you go is a place of grieving or pain, the acknowledgement that that's what you're asking for and what you're willing to take if it comes, I think is the difference for lots of people.
I'd like to add to that, Brooke. I recently had the opportunity. I was in Peru and in the middle of a ketamine therapy training program. So I had my trochees with me. I had to go last minute. And I actually got to have a conscious dying death ceremony to say goodbye to my beloved animal. And it was really empowering and beautiful and quite healing to do that consciously. But what I really want to say is that the playa always brings me very unexpected life stressors or circumstances. Every year it's a different thing, if not more than one thing. Not just the journey and preparing and traveling there, but the playa offers you these gifts or challenges in addition to anything else that you're going in there with. So often you will hear news of a pet dying or a family member dying, or a traumatic event will occur. So if you couple that with things that are really powerfully energetic, like the temple, most people never experience anything like that. So it brings up all of the past loss as well, and grief and bereavement. So whether you're prepared or not, you might be on a psychedelic or on a journey when you hear this kind of news, or have it all come right back to you in immediacy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's all. That's how it goes, right? We can prepare as much as we want. And and maybe this is one of the factors that in some ways is out of our control, like our environment, but in some other ways, whether we're talking our own home, our own tent, or whatever space we're creating with the people that we're physically with, we do have a little bit of say of what our environment can look like. And that can also look like standing up if an environment's not looking for you and walking to a place where it feels either a little safer or a little bit more low key. So the idea of everything from the other people, the location, what the weather's like, the music, the lights, hazards, everything from, sharp sticks and stones to, cliffs and water and things like that. And then finally the people, are the people surrounding you. I mean, first of all, what's the general mindset? What kind of people are these? Are they friends? Are they strangers? Are they figures of authority? Things like that. So we talked a little bit about who's psychedelic support for. I think we got a slide out of order there. So we're going to dive a little bit more into this idea that as Zendo Project, and again, I want to even defer especially to the three of you and the other work that you do outside of Zendo, but within Zendo, we like to kind of make these classifications of somebody is having a psychospiritual or emotional challenge, but they're otherwise medically stable, alert, and oriented, and they're psychiatrically safe. They're not threatening harm to themselves or others. But again, I know with crisis lines, with hospitals, that's not always the case. Like sometimes it is the medically unstable and on psychedelics, or psychiatrically unsafe and on psychedelics. So I'm curious if anybody, from their experience of their other jobs outside of Zendo wants to jump in here, or if we maybe want to table that for later on in this discussion.
I mean, for me, psychedelic support is for everybody. It's certainly not the be all and end all, but I actually think it's a pretty good place to start for almost everybody. There are people that will need something different, whether that is family or whether that's a hospital. But, my answer is everybody.
I'd like to add to that. I've been thinking a lot about how the work environment in the ER has been very intense the past couple of years. And at this point, with the resurgence of COVID, things are at next level stress, and the coworkers are starting to try to, or not even knowingly treating one another with hostility and incivility, because everyone is burnt out, more limited resources, high acuity, high volume. And I was thinking back on when I began Zendo, I didn't know you could treat people like that in the ER setting. We're used to medications, restraints. We have no time to give anybody. So I had to shift the way I did my nursing practice and try and teach others how to do that with what ability we had. And it's amazing what mediation or conflict resolution or a presence can do, or other things that we can do without resorting to those restraints, medications, or physical, and causing more trauma. But so what I've been thinking about recently is, well, maybe what we need is to take these principles towards one another in a collegial manner, and to really not focus it on psychedelics, but on holding ourselves to a higher level and being more present and getting through these challenging times without harming one another and without any cruelty towards one another. So when I go back after this week, I'm going to try to refocus on this way of being in my practice in the hospital. So I'm going to incorporate these principles in that way and try and teach others.
And yeah, I just want to agree with what Brooke and Liz were saying there, that psychedelic support is for anybody. I think in the context of a festival with certain parameters and boundaries that the Zendo has to hold, yes, these things are important, but on some level, psychedelic support can also just be seen as human to human support. That as we go into the principles, these aren't just skills that one can only utilize when someone needs help with a psychedelic. These are very applicable to just the way we can support one another in life. So psychedelic support is for anyone. If you have been trained in psychedelic support, I'm sure that will kind of flow into the other relationships you have in your life. And anyone receiving something that might be deemed as like a psychedelic orientation of support wouldn't even think that, oh, you only say that because you think I'm tripping. I do think that it's deep life skills that come into play when we practice psychedelic support.
So true.
So true.
So some of you know, I've voluntold my daughter and her best friend. They're also Zendo volunteers. And so they know the principles that we're about to get into. And one day they used to be roommates. They're no longer roommates anymore, two adult women. And they got into an argument. And one of them left the house. It was the middle of the night. They lived in San Francisco. And so the other one called me panicking because the one was out on the street and they were having just a heated emotional argument. And I used my Zendo skills and I calmed the one down I was talking to. The other one came back. As soon as they came back, I got off the phone and I allowed them to do their work together. And they texted me minutes later, like maybe 15, 20 minutes later, they texted me and they said, we're both home, we're okay. We're laying in bed, talking it through. Difficult is not bad. And they weren't on psychedelics. They were just two young women going through life together.
And one other thing I'd like to say is I noticed this phenomenon again last weekend when some of us were all together. Once people are trained with these principles or you are practicing it, I kind of call it a Zendo magnet. So whatever show or event you're at or in any setting in public, it's as if people are drawn to you once you're trained. So I just want to put that out there, that actually really does happen.
Yeah, thanks all. Yeah, be warned, folks. There is something magical about that psychedelic support magnet that folks will just find you. So yeah, we're talking about a difficult experience associated with the use or a personal crisis not related to substance use. So this is where, again, I think as we expand this community, as we expand these services, psychedelics aren't necessarily about taking drugs or supporting people on drugs. I think we can all relate to COVID itself and quarantine and all that we've been through in the last year and change as a pretty psychedelic experience. You know, it's a little unreal or a little surreal. So yeah, I think these are pretty applicable across the board, substance or not. So again, you know, to acknowledge the amazing wisdom of my colleagues, absolutely, psychedelic support is for everyone. And within our Burning Man festival concert support, you know, we're not doing medical care, we're not doing clinical interventions, we're not mental health services, and we don't physically restrain or sedate. And again, that is because we're staying in our lane. We're always doing this with professional medical care providers, professional security folks, folks that, if not are directly there, have pretty much instant access to like a crisis intervention team that can help with things like a mental health service, some major crisis, life crisis, suicidality, or things like that. And, you know, we, again, try to stay in our lane and pass it over to the professionals so that they can do their work. Again, where appropriate, let's all remember this. I mean, we want to help people, and sometimes these things are beyond our expertise. I think the best things that we can do in the appropriate situations is find an appropriate level of care and to be able to be there to hold the hand of a friend or a stranger as they're going through that next level of care. So now we're going to jump into this thing that Zendo has been doing for so long, these 4 principles of providing psychedelic support. So a little bit more of a, you know, redundancy, but hopefully the more we hammer this into the world, the more we embody it. But we're creating safe space. We're sitting, not guiding. And again, where appropriate, sometimes it's necessary to help guide somebody out of the middle of the street, to sit down on a sidewalk with them, or to guide them away from a fire. But the idea here is that we are not guides, we're not shamans, we're not therapists. And I say that, but you know, I'm also sitting with you know, a psychedelic therapist and a psychedelic nurse that at times do need to step up and guide. And not just sit. Is that right? Okay.
No, I mean, I'm gonna go out on a limb, but a good therapist doesn't guide either.
Yeah, great point. Yeah. And then the other bit on this through not down is the idea that there is, in all of my experience of watching people talk and support, I have never seen anybody use the phrase calm down or just come down successfully. There's these substances take a certain amount of time, certain amount of brain chemistry that has to be processed. And so the best thing that you can do is support somebody through their journey rather than trying to encourage them to come down. And finally, this last one, a reframing, where appropriate, difficult and not bad. So, you know, there are times, you know, we are very clear that there are bad trips, but sometimes when we can, let's rephrase them or reframe them as difficult. So safe space, the way that somebody once reminded me of this, and that's why I like the little puppers here, is like, we're taking care of a sick infant. Like ultimately, these are folks where I know I've been there in my own version, and maybe those of you that have had a recent psychedelic journey can recognize like you're maybe more there than you are usually, but like some part of you is maybe a little checked out or a little like not quite sure what's going on. So it can be really helpful to have that safe space physically, mentally, and, you know, dare I say spiritually. Adam, rocket.
Yeah, when it comes to safe space, I try to kind of break it down into little categories. Like, so there's the physical environment, you know, what feels safe, and everybody's got their own thing that feels safe to them. Maybe it's like a really soft, like blanketed surrounding. Maybe it's an outdoor setting with lots of nature, dim lighting, whatever that is. But it's not just the physical environment, but those who are present in the environment. And so if we are part of the setting, we need to embody a safe person. And those qualities of safety, when I've asked others what they think of that, typically show up as, non-judgmental, accepting and allowing of what's happening, rather than someone coming in trying to fix something. So these are ways that someone has an ability to feel safe in their experience, or safer at least. So that's just something to think about, that your presence is part of the setting. And in this particular principle, we want to really think about what does it mean to be a safe person? Yeah, consent is another big factor there.
Yeah, so thank you, Adam. Like, yeah, the idea of a supportive individual can go a long way in creating a safe space. If we're coming up to a stranger, we're doing our best to approach with compassion, acceptance, kindness, and openness from a place of inquiry too. I've seen even just the approach go south unintentionally, of like, I'm here to help you, and like somebody's like, I don't need your help, and like start almost running away. So this idea of even just asking somebody, even folks that look like they're having a hard time, that might be their process, and they might not need anybody because they've done it so many times. They're like, actually I had to walk away from my friends because I needed the space to like shake or yell or do whatever. I'm good, thanks for asking. So that idea of just being able to check in with people. And then the other part of that safety sometimes is noticing this guy over here is having this experience and he's fine, but maybe these folks over here witnessing it aren't having such a good time because they don't know what that guy's doing and they're afraid or unclear. And sometimes even just going to approach them and let them know what's going on. Letting folks just know that the experience is welcome. Like I think we can all relate to, at least in this culture, I don't want to say this is a global phenomenon, but it can be so difficult to find a place to properly feel sad, to properly feel happy, or even angry. And I think one of the things I've learned, and I've watched all three of these amazing human beings do, is to help people bring that place of anger beyond a place of violence and move through anger, to bring sadness through a place of depression or kind of inward like grief, and to actually emote. And even a similar thing with joy, giving people permission to be overjoyed. It's a pretty beautiful thing. So the idea that we're giving folks the space to do this, we're doing it with acceptance and making no real expectations or judgments about how they're going through their own individual process. I'm curious if any of the three of you have any other tidbits and wisdom to add to this principle of safe space before we move to the next one.
I just want to always remind everybody to be sure that you're safe yourself and protect yourself and maintain strong boundaries. Actually, Brooke has taught me so much about walking solid and maintaining these boundaries and being mindful. So be sure you're safe in myriad ways, physically, mentally, emotionally. And regarding guests that might attempt to touch you physically, things like consent, always be aware of ways that you might feel yourself unsafe and seek out help as needed in those situations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a big piece, right? Is that safety, and even all four of these principles go both ways, right? It's not the guest safety at the cost of ours. It's always, as we put it, put on your own oxygen mask before helping those around you. So, Adam, Brooke, are we feeling complete on this one, or we got all right? Cool. So we're gonna pop into this next one, which is sitting and not guiding. For those of you that have had psychedelic conversations with your friends, you may be able to relate to this thing that words can sometimes confuse or get in the way. Depending on the substance you're on, it might be difficult to formulate sentences or get out a concept that's happening inside your heart or mind in a way that makes sense to others. So when you're on the other side of that, the ability to listen with an open heart and mind and really be patient, and that our job is, if anything, to help individuals deepen into their experience rather than to pull them out. And I've seen with some of our, and I did this a lot when I first started this work, this, especially with our newer volunteers, it can just be uncomfortable sometimes. It can be uncomfortable in the silence. It can be uncomfortable when somebody's not able to articulate something big and you're trying to help them, or when there's just this place of discomfort. And I think it's a natural human tendency to want to help stop the suffering. But in reality, it's the best gift that we can give is presence, and not try to either distract or change the subject. Certainly comfort where appropriate, but I think this is one of the things that I've learned over the 8 years is to actually be with the person's experience rather than where I think I want them to go, or to try to even change the subject to something lighter because I'm uncomfortable with the darkness or the shadow they're working with. So, you know, also being curious about their reality, I think, is a big piece of this. To not be in conflict with what they're experiencing, but to ask from a place of getting clarity and understanding for your own side, with the with the bigger caveat that you might not really quite understand what's being said, but it's good to listen.
I just wanted to reiterate, I think you said it so well before, and then you kind of just said it again, but that, you know, feeling deeply or feeling large or feeling loud or long isn't bad. And there's lots of places in the world where we're told that it is. And so it can be really confusing when you're in a new space to realize like you want to help somebody, but that help doesn't necessarily mean stopping their or like lessening the process. It's actually growing the process, even if that is inappropriate in lots of other places, meaning, you know, that it's too loud or it's too big or it's lasting too long or it makes me too uncomfortable. And I think one of the real assets of places like Zendo and the ways we take it out in the world is to reteach people that it's okay to have an experience, and the experience can be what it needs to be. And often they need to be a lot more than the experiences we're allowed to have in almost any other place. And so that it's really a gift you can give to people when you're sitting with them, to allow them to deepen into and grow their experience as large and as loud and as heavy and as, you know, fun as it needs to be, without sort of feeling like it has to be compacted for your comfort or the comfort of the greater room, or, you know, that it's a unique space in that way. And I think that's one of the most beautiful aspects of it.
Yeah, thank you, Brooke. Adam?
Yeah, and I'm basically gonna just probably say the same things in different words, but one way I can see this principle, sitting not guiding, is could also be stated as allowing not controlling. So you know, we can't control the experience. We're not in charge of the experience. Attempts to control the experience will create more distress, and it takes an effort on our ego, on our agenda, to be able to put that to the side and to simply be with, like, well, I guess this is the direction it's going, and we can be with that, and that's okay. So yeah, basically the same words in a different way, I guess.
I like that reframe. We might have to consider renaming this one to allowing not controlling. It feels so comprehensive to a lot of things. Thanks, Adam. Liz, you got anything on this sitting not guiding?
Well, you know, I love to sit and watch it unfold and just be present. And I'll make a comment about some of the experiences I'm having on Fireside's line. I'll listen in on different volunteers' calls to observe, or I'll take callers. And sometimes they're an hour, 2 hours, or briefer. And it's some of the most intense experiences coming up, in a lot of trauma, a lot of PTSD, really unbelievable subject matter in these intimate moments between complete strangers. And so I'm in this complete silent role, muted, witnessing all of this. And it is so profoundly powerful. And just being there, even in complete silence, means so much. to support the volunteer, or for my own learning, my own experience, or just for the caller to be able to share something they've never shared with anyone and to feel safe enough to do so.
Thank you. I love that. It reminds me of some of the things that I've witnessed in men's work and co-ed work, of just being present to watch somebody's process is actually healing that same thread in me. Even if I can't relate to the trauma they've had or the experience they've gone through, I believe we're collectively carrying a lot of trauma that we're not aware of. And to be able to watch somebody recognize their own and move through it, I think is powerful on both sides, and gives us, yeah, kind of the fuel, right? To be able to, I know for me anyway, to be able to witness these things, sometimes it's like I can be exhausted, and then I see somebody working through some big stuff, and I'm like, all right, I got the motivation to go refill the water, to go make sure our power and electricity and any of the other like stewardship that needs to be done. It's, yeah, it's this beautiful motivation to know that we're doing big work here collectively. So thanks for framing it up. Through, not down. Well, again, this concept of a bridge. I mean, I really like this metaphor. Like, the point of taking the psychedelic is to get from one, maybe it's not the point, but the journey of taking a psychedelic is getting from one end of the bridge to the other, and trying to force or request somebody to get off the bridge because we don't like where they're going is actually, you know, it's dangerous when you think about it in physical life, but metaphorically, it doesn't allow completion of the journey. And this is again why we at Zendo do not do any sort of restraint or sedation. But looking at this through, you know, a bigger model of what we are doing is we're encouraging individuals to turn towards their experience. We're asking them to trust their own inner guru, their own guide, their process of what's coming up, rather than, you know, saying, oh, you shouldn't have that thought, or that's weird that you would think that. And even, you know, more so, there's this thing that I've seen done so well in Zendo over the years, where we are not only, you know, not dismissing, but acknowledging people's perceived reality. And I've seen that be so magical around paranoia, around feeling alienated or disconnection, just to acknowledge whether or not it's something that we're seeing, witnessing, or is a shared reality, to say, this is your reality. And I believe this is the reality you're having. I'm seeing, so I hear that right now you see a big purple snake coming at us. I don't see that purple snake, but I hear that you do. What would you like to do with that purple snake? Do you need protection? Do you need to just watch it? How would you like to experience this? You know, and that idea that for those of us that have been in these states, it's not always easy to communicate that reality. So to have the compassion and just even the recognition of the courage of what it takes to express something so strange and weird. Yeah, Brooke.
The perceived reality is, I kind of am hung up on that, like that to me, that's really real. There isn't any objective reality. And I think that, you know, whether we can see the purple snake or not, that purple snake is real. And again, it's one of the gifts that psychedelics give us, is a portal into seeing other realities that are always around us. We just can't always see them. And so I think that sort of even to take that a step farther and realize when you're walking through another reality with somebody when they're on a psychedelic, and if they're able to share that with you, it's a gift that you're receiving. And there's, you know, a lot of space for you to be in the reality that you're usually in, which is just one version of a multitude, and, you know, can get quite boring, frankly, at times. So it's an opportunity to really check out what's that like, that, you know, multiverse next door. And in whatever way that people you're sitting with can translate that to you, it's an adventure that you can take alongside of them as a real trip that's real, not just perceived.
Thanks for that reframe.
I'd also like to bring it back to the first thing you said about talk through, not down, way early on. Is like, is it even, when was the last time you told someone who was feeling a lot to calm down, and did that even work? You know, that's really, I think, the essence of like, we can't bring someone down. We have to go through, and the attempts to bring someone down can just make things harder. And then I'd also like to sort of do a reframe on the last bullet point here, if possible. So the bullet point says,
Please, yeah.
try to avoid rushing the experience, trying to fix the scenario, or find a solution. And I might reframe that as, avoid rushing the experience. There is nothing to fix, no problem for a solution.
Amen, Adam. Thank you. I just want to acknowledge like that one bit right there has been maybe the biggest piece of work for me for 8 years. And I think it is an inherent shadow of the masculine of like, oh, what's wrong? Okay, let me fix that for you. Let me find a solution, rather than just like, oh, the only thing that you need to do is just express that something's wrong right now. Nothing needs to be fixed. I don't need to go out and like go buy a thing to make everything better. You just need to feel the way you feel. And I need to actually feel, hear, receive, listen, and reflect back, rather than trying to fix it or solve it. And I just want to praise the way that I've seen all three of you embody that with such patience and such love and such open-ended non-expectation when I've watched you do your genius in the Zendo Project. So thank you. It's been huge. I've learned a lot from all three of you. Are we ready for this one? Do I need to pop back? Are we feeling complete with through not down? Okay, seeing some nods. Difficult is not the same as bad. Again, like, there are bad trips. Being dosed non-consensually is a bad trip. Finding yourself in a very unpleasant place where you witness something, or having a conversation that feels assaulting. There's so many ways to say that they're bad things. And, this is the interesting bit for me anyway, as I've looked into my pre-Zendo bad trips and people that I've been with bad trips, which is often my unconscious is showing me something I don't want to look at, and I want it to stop. And that's bad because I can't make it stop. And it's showing me all these grotesque things that are happening on the planet or have happened throughout history. And I just want it to stop because it's not pleasant. It's not something I want to see. It's not uplifting. But it's, on some level, I'm realizing as I look back at this, a gift to be reminded that some of the experiences that maybe I haven't had in this lifetime have happened to humans that I know and are in my community. And this may be the only way that I can really get it, because there's something about being seen or having those experiences or seeing those things in the mind's eye on psychedelics that are certainly more impactful for me anyway than they have been when somebody's talked about a scenario or whether I've theorized it. So the idea that difficult life experiences can be valuable learning opportunities, that if we really think about the hardest moments in our lives, whether that was heartbreak or losing somebody we loved, or not getting our dream job or dream house or any of those things, that the pivots that we have made and the individuals we become because of those hardships have made us more solid and more who we are here to be, maybe on some level. So the idea that these difficult experiences can be an opportunity for learning and healing and bring new insights and understanding if we really not only give that opportunity to ourselves, but I'm going to say this is maybe even one of the better opportunities for community and support, where sometimes being able to have a conversation or get a reflection from somebody that we know, or even a stranger, can really help insights or a reframe of what otherwise might have felt bad to become difficult, and a catalyst for learning. I often like using the metaphors of compost, right? That there's this amazing process of taking like our food scraps and our waste, and with the right love and stewardship, we can make the most nutritious soil for something beautiful to grow. And I believe that metaphorically we're doing that with our shadow. You know, this idea of making relationship with shadow, those parts of us that we've maybe disowned or outcast, to figure out what does that part need? How does it need to be loved? How can it be of service in my life? And you know, so it's a heck of a journey, but that's one of the reframes for me anyway that's been really valuable.
I think this is a place where what Liz pointed out earlier about taking care of yourself. I'm sorry, Adam, I never see your hand. Go ahead, I can finish after. Your hand gets absorbed in the year.
Okay, yeah, I guess it's a color things. And anyways, the thing that I was going to bring up here is basically, since we've seen all 4 principles now, I think it's really important to note that 3 of the principles are reframes: sitting, not guiding; through, not down; difficult, not the same as bad. And that is because, due to whatever cultural story we've come to, we've naturally found ourselves in these other forms of seeing things. So when someone asks what I do, they're like, oh, do you guide people to good trips? Or do you talk them down from their trips? Or, oh, these, you know, you help people who are having bad trips. And the reason for all these reframes is it actually helps us as psychedelic support people approach a particular intense experience from a different lens, which is contrary to what we've been talking, or what we've been like, or at least what I in this culture has been raised with like the fixer mentality, like, oh, we need to make you feel better, all these things. So I just wanted to point out how the 4 principles like have within them a attempt at switching our perspective a bit on how this all works. That's all I wanted to say.
I hadn't thought of it like that before. Thanks for pointing that out. What was on my mind was about what Liz had said earlier about the importance of attuning to yourself and how easy it is to become so interested in supporting other people that you forget about yourself. And I think for me, when things are difficult or bad or both, is the time that I really try to remember that this, you know, there's a parallel process here for those of us who are providing psychedelic support as there are for the people who are receiving it, and that oftentimes it can become overwhelming to do alone. And when things get really traumatic or dark or big or hard, is a time to rely on the rest of your community too. To allow them to care for you, to bring you some water, or to tap you out for a break, or to just sit next to you and have some presence with you, like Liz was talking about as the sort of silent supervisor with Fireside. Because things can get really heavy. You know, that's, I think, is one of the points. I don't know if it's our point as humans in taking psychedelics, but I think it's the spirit of a lot of these medicines point is to dig in and find that stuff in order for us to work with it in a way that our egos won't let us, or our cultures won't let us. And so I just want to call back to that point Liz made, that when things get difficult and or bad is a really good time to remember that you're not in isolation either, and that you can receive support in the Zendo or in whatever version of the Zendo you create in your community. Even while you're providing support, you can be receiving support, because things do get deep. And we want them to be deep, but it's easier for all of us if we are attending to each other and making sure we remember to receive even as we're giving.
Liz, you got anything on this one? Do you have anything to add on the difficult is not the same as bad?
I think I would just like to mention a couple personal things. The first being, I don't think I really understood anything about the shadow until I did work with ayahuasca, and difficult is not bad. When I hear this, I think of these journeys that you go on, whether you prepare or you plan or not, whether it's unexpected. And they are very difficult, and they bring up so much that you can't quite comprehend. And so what I love about the Zendo and the other experiences that I've had resulting from it is the peer support component and being able to receive that that friendship or that other way to look at things or perceive things, and really to challenge myself to grow. So another thing I want to mention that's personally important to me right now, with the difficult is not bad, comes back to, I really feel like healers themselves, all the healthcare providers, mental health therapists, the first responders, all of you people participating today or viewing in the future, we've been going through a really difficult time, and it could be perceived as bad. But this is an amazing chance for us to really recognize that shadow in our systems and in ourselves and how we relate with one another, and to do that shadow work. And so one thing I hope that one day, you know, we can do is do this psychedelic healing together and do this difficult work together. And this is a great way to begin it, by being here and present. And so specifically, I wish we could offer MDMA therapy for healthcare providers. I wish we could offer ketamine for providers, for us, for our community, and peer support to get through these difficult times and the ones to come in the future.
Thank you all. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and we have a few more slides as we wrap this up. What I'd really like us to dive into is a community, and you know, the difficult is not the same as bad aspects of community, as well as the through not down aspects of community, and all the other things that we've seen over the years of our extended Zendo community, as well as our tighter knit core crew, some of which is not Zendo, and how we navigate these things. So I got some resources. I will copy and paste all of these as we wrap up the slideshow directly into the chat. Looks like we got some books here as well. Hey, here we are. Let's talk about community. So I see we got some great questions, and maybe one of the ones that would be a good segue into community. Yeah, go Adam.
I just wanted to add one more book to the list as I did a quick scan that I think is one of the top books for people providing support to people undergoing psychospiritual crises, spiritual emergencies, psychedelic intense things. It's The Stormy Search for the Self by Stan and Christina Groff. That one in particular is not just like a really great foundational understanding of those states of consciousness, but also practical advice for someone going through it and for someone who's offering support to someone going through it. Really awesome resource, FYI.
Thanks, Adam. Can we have one of our behind the scenes folks look up that book and paste it into our chat for us? Thank you. So one of the things that, I mean, there are actually two questions that I think kind of are a little related but different. One is, how can I get Zendo resources at a regional burning event? Yeah, awesome. We've done that before. All four of us, and maybe this is a good way. So let me kind of answer that question, then I'm going to rewind to an experience we all had at a regional. Unclear what's going on until COVID becomes a little more safe. Zendo is right now just on hiatus and in pause and limbo and in our little cocoon. We're bringing more education to the online forum. We're trying to have more webinars. You'll see all of that this fall be more announced and launched. But yeah, this is absolutely something that we started doing right before COVID hit and looked at other US things. But what I think might be a really interesting segue here is the four of us have all been to an amazing regional event called Africa Burned. And we helped to bring Zendo Project there. That wasn't officially Zendo Project, but helped create sanctuary with the amazing Africa Burn Rangers there. Met one of, I think, the coolest burning communities. And I'm just saying that because I haven't been to many regionals, folks. I don't want to poop on anybody's regionals. I know there's some amazing ones out there. But I will just say that I experienced a level of community and intimacy at Africa Burn unlike any other place I've been. And I'm just curious what the four of us might share about our experience there that was either different or similar to some of the best experiences we've had at other events and festivals.
One thing that stands out for me with Africa Burn is that it was so out of my wheelhouse culturally, you know, like literally on the other side of the world. You know, Sarah and I like to joke I had to drive after what 17-hour flight or so, 24 hours, 12 to London, 12 to Cape Town, hop out the plane and drive a stick shift with that's on the other side of the road.
The wrong side of the road.
That foreign, the other side, not wrong, just other. And so for me, it sort of cemented all of my work forward, and really recognizing the importance of cultural humility, and recognizing that like Zendo works at burning, man. I'm a burner. I'm an American burner. I live in California. You know, I live in the psychedelic world. That's my culture in lots of ways. And dropping into Sanctuary in Africa Burn really humbled me in really recognizing and allowing space in every community I've worked with since then to sort of be like, does this work here? Is this the way that I do it? What's going to be the way that you do it? Here's what I have to offer. And almost like we've seen, you know, Adam gives so much beautiful feedback about maybe rewording some of this in these slides. Like that type of a process, I think, is really important when working regionally, and really even just group to group, community to community, is really going like, okay, this has worked for us. What do you think about it? Would it work for you? How would you change it? What might be different? And Sanctuary down at Africa Burn just does it very differently. They're much more medical. And, you know, I'm thinking of Boom also, which does it beautifully and very differently in its own way. And that both of those are sort of, you know, Zendo, Cosmic Care, and Sanctuary all have these beautiful ways of doing psychedelic harm reduction and support that are all somewhat in contrast to each other in certain ways. And it's because the communities that they're serving are different, and the people think and talk and interact differently there. And I think that's something really important, moving this into communities, however that looks. I saw someone in the Q&A ask about doing this in a home-free encampment or population. I think that's a really important place to consider. You know, what is it? How do you want to talk about it? How would it land in this? What would a safe space look like for that community versus for my community? And so that's something that has really changed my life in all of my work too. My therapy, my family, all of my travels, and certainly in my harm reduction work.
Yeah, thank you, Brooke. And yeah, I'd love to kind of integrate that, because that was I thought a very related question, the regional. I think this has been a conversation that I've had with folks at MAPS, some of our volunteers, some outside consultants. I think there's some really interesting crossover between refugee camps, disaster relief, and these 4 principles. And I think it would be amazing to bring it. Yeah, Adam, rock it.
Yeah, I want to echo what Brooke was saying, that these sanctuary services, or these peer support spaces, are adaptable to the communities they serve. And so if we were to really boil it down, like what is being offered here, it is a safe, supported atmosphere with a trained support person, trained in like active listening, peer support, space holding. And that could be applicable to home-free camps or refugee camps or whatever events that your communities are putting on. I want to like empower people to create these spaces themselves. That it's not necessarily, that Zendo's not the only entity out there that can do this. I've created my own sanctuary services at a number of different events that are not Zendo events, and each one has a very different model or structure to the overall safety of the event itself, and curated to the culture of the event itself. So, for example, Zendo, the entrance of Zendo, getting into Zendo, there's a very formal process. You speak with the greeter pairs you up with a sitter, the lead is aware of all these things, and you sit down and you have your experience, and then you leave. That is a very good model for certain kinds of events, that especially like large-scale events. Smaller events that I've created sanctuary services for has actually a more open, casual atmosphere, where it's almost like we as the space holders are creating a a bubble of a calm zone that people can come in and out casually as they need. So we have people dropping in, or what we sometimes call flybys, for just a few minutes to just catch their breath, ground and center a bit, and then they go back out. But then incorporated in that model is a more acute zone for someone who's actually really like going into something. So just know that these things are very adaptable, and as long as the goal is to provide a calm, grounding, supportive atmosphere, that you can make that however you dream, however you vision.
I just want to share that one of our volunteers, Adele, who we all know and love, actually had the opportunity and the invitation to start a sanctuary space in Spain for the Nowhere Burn. And so she took all that she learned, also at an international event in Vision and within our Zendo, and created one appropriate to that set and setting, to that culture. And it was more of the medical was separate, Brooke, and then it was called welfare. And there wasn't really like a supervisor on duty. And this was fascinating to me. It was a community kind of space. And so the volunteers would come and go. So this was something, you know, that she created from everything she learned from Zendo that turned out to be very different, very unique, and very beautiful. And each one of our viewers could do that as well. And Ryan, I'm very happy to hear you mention the disaster response and the refugee work, because it's critical. And again, it is taking these principles to wherever we are. And an aspect of that, to go back into the earlier chat, people were commenting about the harm that can come from medical trauma. When we are thinking about the upcoming decriminalization, and this is what I appreciate about MAPS's work, they're preparing for this. We really do need to get more community safe places where we're helping one another at that level, rather than going into the bigger systems, into the ERs or into the psych crisis units. So I would like to encourage people to really consider how to create those safe community small spaces that are that mid-level care that we do not have, that we desperately need. Thank you.
Well, speaking of that, Liz, doesn't something like that exist in Eugene, Oregon? Like, is that the In Cahoots program, Adam?
Well, Cahoots, so yeah, so the group that I worked with, Whitebird, they are a social services organization with many different branches. They started as a crisis center, and I worked on the crisis team. They have a mobile crisis team called Cahoots, which stands for Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets. Whitebird likes to get silly with their acronyms. And they're called Cahoots, and they're a mobile crisis team that goes and meets people, whether it's, you know, at their home or on the street or in person, wherever they are, to be a first responder of mental health emergencies rather than like medical and police style. So there's a number of groups that are who have started that over the years. Cahoots has been doing it since, I believe, the early 80s. And of course, recently, after you know, the tragedy of George Floyd and the protests, it's become a much bigger subject that police responses are not always the best responses. So yeah, there are movements towards that, but I'll also bring it back to just a peer support atmosphere too. There are groups that set up empathy tents at like farmers markets. There's like really straightforward, simple things that people do, which mirror what we're all talking about here, psychedelics aside, that creating a space with volunteers who are there to just receive and reflect and support someone in their process rather than, like, you know, be that person giving them advice all the time.
Well, speaking of that brings me to a question here that I think is a really interesting conversation around group dynamics and community. This is from an anonymous attendee, and it goes like this. Speaking of having a witness, I would love to know y'all's take on one-on-one psychedelic support versus group ceremonies and setting. I feel like there's something to be said for group setting, especially for those who may be completely new or newer to psychedelics and struggling to grapple with the altered reality and experiencing the mental strain. The confusion and isolation is reduced with the reminder that there are others going through their own work around you. And then I have also heard of the benefits of one-on-one trip setting because it gives someone permission to truly feel through their hard stuff with more privacy. When working with friends, clients, your communities, how do you advise which one may be the better fit? Perspectives on one-on-one versus group settings. So Liz, I know you and I can both speak to the effectiveness of being in a group ceremony like ayahuasca.
Yeah, I'll speak to a couple ideas I'm having right now. I think some of it depends on the medicine that you're interested in working with. Some of it depends on the facilitator that you have available and their knowledge base and experience, and what you're really looking for. Now, is it a ceremonial context? And I've worked with groups in ayahuasca and then in ketamine now via Zoom, and they're very different. But what I love about the idea of the group and the sacred container is you really can do your own individual deep work within that bigger space, and you do feel safe and you do feel supported. And you can be there for other people when they are in need. You don't have to talk down or guide, but you can escort somebody out to be outside or to get what they need from the experience. I like the individual work for other reasons, but one of my dreams is to have the individual work for healthcare providers, for example, first responders, right? To do the medicine sessions individually and then come together in a peer support group to integrate it. So I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but be cautious who you partake with and where you are. Do your research, get your recommendations, know about the origin of the substances, be mindful of the indigenous rights, and also the legal ramifications of where you are working and who you're with. So I would think about all of those different things. And if you want to or are able to travel to where certain plant medicines come from, that's something I believe is very important if you have the opportunity to do that. As far as recovery and addiction, I really see a great peer support group modality there. And I think that for wildfire victims currently in California, people experiencing this repetitive recurrent trauma, we definitely could do some great work with healing. And a big unknown population is the adolescent population. For my friends in Sonoma County, Shasta's been on fire, and now Tahoe. There's all of these youth who've been impacted by not only the wildfires and losing their homes and this constant threat of fear, or living in Oregon with the pollution, but people also who were isolated from COVID. So we have this whole generation of young people right now that I think a potential psychedelic peer support group model would really benefit in communities where there are no mental health resources. They are desperate. There's a huge need for this healing. So that's another idea that I have.
Thanks, Liz. Awesome. Yeah, I think I'll just step in and say maybe one of the most critical, maybe critical is not the right way to put it. Maybe where having some more privacy is applicable is for folks that are working in certain areas of leadership or publicity, that maybe being in a group setting and having some more personal things and more private things come out may not be safe. And so that being said, if it were up to me, I mean, I think there's also some amazing things about individual, but what I've seen at Zendo is it's really nice to have a second. It's really nice when things get sideways or somebody starts creating this either attraction or repulsion based on whatever archetype you represent. It's really nice to be able to be like, and then there's this other person to shift up the energy. And I think that's what's really made so much of our sitting experience at Zendo effective is when we get to a place where somebody feels the conflict is more interpersonal, that we can just sub somebody in who's a new face or a different energy. And we've seen the energies actually shift almost immediately in some of those cases, just because of how we interface and dance with different archetypes in our lives.
Yeah, I might just kind of say that, there isn't really one is better or worse. It's really just each individual's preferred method, I think. And yes, there are pros and cons to each one. What are you looking for? All that stuff. And then I also want to echo what was stated about, do research on the person who you might be entrusting as a facilitator. Make sure that that you're looking for someone that you feel safe and trusting with, that you have others that might be able to vouch for that person. There's a great document on the Women's Visionary Council's website about safety in searching for ceremonies. And it lists basically like what you should be considering if you are looking for a ceremony, and how to stay safe, essentially. Because facilitator abuse is a thing. It's a terrible thing. And it's really important that you're able to read the flags before getting caught in someone else's abuse or trip. Let me see if I can find a link for that.
Thanks, Adam. I love that. There's one that hits close, that hits home for me. This is from Emily Alice. Where does the concept of psychotic fit or not fit within the psychedelic harm reduction? As many people could describe some difficult psychedelic experiences, psychotic breaks. Is that rejected as beyond the scope of this kind of care? Since it's a kind of diagnosis, is it rejected as part of the psychiatric industrial complex, or does it have relevance? Or would you just be willing to riff on this for a minute? My question's pretty spontaneous, so I don't trust that it's well articulated or spot on. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and wisdom. So at the beginning of this talk, I shared that I had my own experience. I went down to Peru at a 10-day dieta, and one of the plant mixtures that I was fed during that time was called Chiricsanango. And I found out almost a decade later that it was a deliriant. It's part of the Datura family. I would not have, I think, gone into it. Not that I wouldn't have done it, I maybe would have been a little more cautious. I don't think after reading all that I have on Arrowwood about deliriants that would have been something I would have intentionally taken. So it's been an interesting thing because I was not diagnosed. I did not go into a mental hospital, but if you ask anybody who knew me that was taking care of me during that time, I was certainly not of right mind. I was not necessarily a harm to myself or others, but I was right on that line. And it's an interesting piece because we talk about this in our trainings and at our events as everything from a psychotic break, a psychotic episode, a spiritual emergence, a spiritual emergency. And I've seen those words and phrases used pretty interchangeably. It is something that we have dealt with as Zendo Project. It is something that when we're faced with that, we bring in our crisis intervention team. We do have mental professionals there to make a more honest diagnosis around what's going on. And we, if often at the end of these events, because Zendo is packing up, the entire festival is packing up, and this is often when these folks surface, choose to, through the, I guess, wisdom and advice of the other medical and mental health staff that we're working with, send them to the next level of care that they often need in those situations. And it's not always easy, but sometimes it's necessary. And I'm curious, yeah, Brooke, and Liz and Adam, what you've seen or want to say about that.
Yeah, I guess I think that's a really interesting question, and I think it's a philosophical one. And I'm going to answer it in a practical way. there's some information that you need to gather to make that distinction. What drugs have been taken, if any, when they were taken, roughly how much, are there other medications that were stopped in order to take the drugs that the person's on in the moment? What have they ever had a mental health diagnosis prior? What's their life like? What was their behavior like in the hours before you met them, so that you can get sort of a picture of like, is this a psychedelic experience, which, you know, can look psychotic. It can look like you're in another reality. That's what being psychotic is. It's that the line between what the expected shared reality is and your own experience of reality becomes blurred. And so, you know, in the Zendo, what we do is we sort of gather that information. And then if there are psychedelics on board, we wait it out. We let the drugs wear off, because oftentimes the drugs wear off and people come back to the shared reality and they are no longer psychotic. In which case maybe there's some preparation and some help for them to make sure the people in their lives that they know can keep an eye on them, maybe some education around, you know, how to make sure you're safe when you're using drugs, maybe even some consultation about what, you know, safer ways to get off of other meds that people often get off of in order to take psychedelics. And it would only really be until hours and hours and hours and hours later, after the expected end of the drug psychoactive period passed, that someone was still having difficulty coming back to a shared reality that allows them to, you know, go home and take a shower and eat a meal and sleep next to their loved ones and go to school or work the next day, that we would start thinking, do we need to maybe escalate this forward to really evaluate their mental health and if something might have changed in their brains. There's a sort of an unfortunate coincidence that lots of times the time in life when real psychotic disorders come on is right around the time people like to go party at festivals. And so young adults can be having a psychotic disorder come online right at the same time that they're going to Burning Man and you know, taking lots of psychedelics. And so, you know, those things are all really important things to consider. Certainly in Zendo, would never make a psychotic, you can't make a psychotic diagnosis based on someone you've seen for 12 or 24 or even 36 hours. And so that's something that would be, you know, if necessary, after that amount of time, passed on to either people in their lives that can assure that they're going to get somewhere safe. That would be ideal. A sober partner, a family member, making sure that they're aware of what had happened, what was taken, and that they have a place to get medical care next or psychological care next. Or if none of those are possible, they're going to stay and live off the land forever, even though the event's closing and all of their community is gone. Then we would need to have them evaluated by psychological professionals to decide what the next best step is. And I think honestly, most of the people that we see are okay. The reality is that even people who have real, true-blown biochemical psychotic disorders are capable of living really healthy, happy lives with the right medical intervention. And so, you know, I think all of those points come into play before we go like, oh, you're acting psychotic, you're probably schizophrenic, you should go to the hospital. That's the least best outcome in our opinion.
Thanks, Brooke. That was awesome.
I wonder if anyone here has any thoughts on distinctions between psychosis and spiritual emergencies, because under that model, Stan Groff purports that if it is in fact a spiritual emergency, it actually is something that can be moved through and resolved. And even if it's something that maybe was catalyzed by a psychedelic, may not completely come down once the psychedelic is out of the system. And sometimes spiritual emergencies can emerge not from psychedelics, but either just on just random natural occurrence or deep spiritual work or other things that push someone's level of consciousness to the edge.
Yeah, I have one more thing to add about that. Actually, thanks for reminding me. You know, in order to consider something a psychological disorder or something that's sort of mental health challenge, it has to be causing significant disruption to the person's life. They have to be in significant distress about it. They're not able to live the life that they want to live. And I think that's a really important thing to consider, even when people are having, you know, psychotic experiences, they often do have a sense of whether they're okay or not, whether they like it or not. You know, we've all seen the people who are, you know, happily talking to their imaginary friend walking down the street, and it's like they would maybe be psychotic, but if they're functioning, there's no reason to make them do something that they're not, you know, to medicate them. But if they're, you know, hurting themselves and hurting others and not able to live the life they want to live and can't find a way to push through that process in the society that they're in, then I think that's a pretty clear line to consider. How much harm is it causing the person? How much are they restricted from living the life they want to live?
Yeah.
Just from the nursing perspective, it's those things that we would consider holdable in my role professionally, but we don't have that role in our peer support space. And so if they were suicidal, homicidal, gravely disabled in any way, I think what Brooke said was fantastic. And one of the most important things is that community and that support. If someone can get home, whatever country we're in, wherever we are, or whatever party you're at, if you can get someone home safely with their own community, rather than escalating to something that might cause trauma, that's the ideal outcome. But there may be somebody that's alone. And that usually is the person that comes the last day of the event and does need our help. And then just regarding the spiritual emergence and the psychosis, it is so hard to differentiate sometimes. And I really, I wish we could have this place for the young people who have these first breakthroughs or experiences resulting after psychedelics or cannabis, a place where we could have a safe like Mecca for them outside of the medical system. So I think that time, giving people time and space and community and love and support is what I would add.
I'd like to just quickly share that there are certain spaces, like alternative healing centers, that are spaces for people experiencing their first psychotic break and aren't trying to go the avenue of medical intervention and chemicals. One of those places I know exists in Vermont, and I can't quite remember the name, but one of our fireside, basically our fireside director of operations and outreach person, Katie, she comes from that organization. So she's very much aware of like using a peer support model for people experiencing psychosis. I wonder if I could remember it, but right now I can't. But I wanted to mention like there are certain places popping up, which is nice.
And then just to mention the importance of fireside, it coincided with many hard things that were happening in people's homes while taking psychedelic and adverse outcomes. So it's a beautiful thing to have a phone call or a text away if you yourself aren't under the influence of the substance, to have it as a resource should you need guidance in discerning what's really happening here, what should my next step be, and in preventing any further crisis. Thank you.
Well, you know, guys, this really hits on this topic that's been so near and dear to my heart over the last few years of community. And again, I want to say it here publicly. I am here and I am alive and I'm doing the work and safe because my community, my family, the folks that I traveled down to Peru with brought me home safe. They did all the things, safe space. They talked me through, not down. And I'm so grateful. And I think one of the things that sometimes really can break my heart, can really just get me in a place of grief is knowing that that is not the case for everyone. And I'm seeing some of these questions here in the Q&A of, you know, how can I get started or connected in smaller communities in non-metro areas? Also talking about what's going on with the psilocybin initiative up in Oregon, and you know, talking about more attention towards follow-up counseling, community and longer-term integration. And again, I'll put this in the chat for everybody to check out. We had a great conversation with Tony Moss and Audrey Scott Williams yesterday about community. And I think one of the things that's slowly shifting in my heart is that still psychedelics have amazing potential, but maybe they're not going to do much without community. That maybe the best drug that we can find on this planet right now is community. And this idea that even this idea of like, because we have it in the Zendo community, there's this, you know, and again, to use this word tribal in a way that is this idea of we're magnetized around a certain set of values and service and guidelines and principles. But as Tony Moss was saying, and he really, I don't have it, but maybe one of my colleagues can put it in there. There's a great podcast that Tony Moss and Eamon Armstrong from Life is a Festival did. And Tony really went off on the idea of we got to move past this idea of tribalism and start seeing ourselves as a global community. That we as the human species are actually in a really precarious place. And we need to start moving past this us and them and really seeing this as a collective we. And yet, you know, there's also this thing, Dunbar's number, that's the number of cognitive relationships that we can have, which is around 150. It's not just knowing 150 people, it's knowing how 150 people know each other, all those interconnected relationships. So I want to pose this to the three of you, like, what's been awesome about community? What has fed the three of you over your lifetime? What have you discovered? Where have you come from? I mean, again, I want to be cognizant that we've got about 14 minutes, so maybe this is too deep and big of a question, but both what has fed, where's that light of community that you see as potential? How can people find their own? And then where are maybe some of those pitfalls that we need to have that discernment and that cautiousness and that patience around? Because I just want to acknowledge I've been on both sides of wanting to jump in head first, being too vulnerable, being too disclosing too much about myself with people that weren't safe, because I wanted to find that connection. And I think there's a lots of ways that we individually get to do this dance. But I would love to hear from the three of you about how you see that place of integration and support of these psychedelic journeys in the long term.
For my response to this question of community, I'd actually like to tie it right back into Fireside. A major theme that we've seen coming into the Fireside line is people experiencing these big psychedelic experiences and not having anyone to talk to about it who can either validate it, understand it, listen to it non-judgmentally, and they're surrounded by their friends and family who just say, "Oh, you just took a bunch of drugs, oh, we're so worried about you now," and it's amazing how something as simple as oh yeah, that happened, something as simple as that could make a huge difference between someone feeling like they're going crazy or being pathologized to realizing that they're not the only ones. As simple as it is, it's also very profound. We've had people calling in who have been pathologized after their experiences, who've been put on medications because of the things that they were thinking and saying, and then other people who just really don't have a psychedelic group of friends. So they've experimented a bit with some of their buddies, and their buddies like, yeah, I don't want to do that anymore. That's too weird for me. And they're having these openings and no one to talk to about it. So there is an aspect of like, there's like a major component to thriving that requires community. So that's my piece there. Yeah.
Well, I think I'll add a couple things. If I consider the community I came from, I think it requires continuity. And I could speak just to, I was able to go to Shoreline the past 2 nights to see fish, and missing that community of people that love the music, love the lights, love dressing up or not. I might dress up more than most people sometimes, but you know, people that are in it together. And this is what I first learned from Grateful Dead on the lot. I was like, what? People hug each other, people help each other, people support one another, they travel together. This is a family that I never had. And that's what I found with the Zendo. The Zendo's my family. And you know, they've always welcomed me, and it's just such a huge integral part of my life because it's what I believe in. And I love having this continuity. I know we can't be in person now, but this is a connective way to keep us going and to know that there are like-minded souls and beings who believe in what we do and who may not always agree, but who will challenge us to grow, and we can change everything together. And then if I relate community to my career and my future, okay, so I want to be a psychedelic nurse, researcher, therapist. I want to help save the world with psychedelics, but I want to do it with nursing. Well, how am I going to do that the best way possible? How am I going to grow that community and find people who share the same values as me? And I like seeing things like CIS's alumni group creating their platform, their networking, their teaching, continuing education. Shakruna, different lectures, the San Francisco Psychedelic Society teaching the microdosing movement. So, you know, for those people who do want to explore individually, there's people telling you what the best way they know how and what they value, and you can take it or leave it. But people are starting to put themselves out there. For example, you know, I was in the closet for so many years because of my licensure, but I believe in the medicine and the healing potential so much that with my fellow community, we're stepping forward and we're changing the world. So I think it's really thinking about the future and the way you want to walk your path.
Yeah, that's the core of it for me too, is being yourself, showing up as yourself. And then that allows the people to see you. And when you're seen and when you're seeing, that's where community grows. It's an intimacy, it's being authentic together. My own personal heritage is Dutch and French, not the warmest people in the world. We're intellectuals. And so I didn't grow up with much warmth or much connection emotionally or socially. And then I became a mother very early in life. I was a teen mom, and I sort of had this little baby, and she wanted so much intimacy, and I was just so out of my league. I didn't know how to be intimate at all. And sort of that, you know, and I'd already done a lot of psychedelics at that time, but not in community. And I realized that, you know, I needed to learn how to show up individually for her. And then she grew into this sort of beautiful person of her own that I genuinely like and want to be there for. And so I sort of took that and put it like around my community as I grew up and went into the world. And, you know, to me now, it doesn't matter who is sitting in front of me, I'm present for them. And I'm present not only in attending to them, but I'm present as Brooke, that I'm like me and all my, you know, faults and all my strengths, and sort of being like, I'm here, and knowing that I don't need everybody to accept me. I know some people won't, and I'm going to be there for the conflict when that happens, and that there's going to be more intimacy built. And so the way that I've sort of pushed through my own shortcomings and my own heritage and tried to build community was really being one-to-one present and available, you know, as my full self. And I've seen that just spread. You know, there's things like MDMA is a great tool to help that be easier. And, you know, I think music and art and ritual and, you know, any type of a ceremony that you can participate in. But for me, that's really just showing up, looking people in the eyes and being like, hi, I'm Brooke, nice to meet you. And just connecting, whatever that looks like, you know. These days, it's often a smile and a wave, but it used to be a hug or a pat on the back or a high five or dancing on the dance floor or, you know, clapping after some music performance. And I think those things are connective. And a lot of psychedelics allow us either to become more ourselves and feel more comfortable as ourselves, allowing us to show that, and or to become more accepting of sitting with people, no matter how they are different or the same as us. And so you can do that right now. You can walk out on the street, you can turn to the person sitting next to you and just be present with them in a way that's authentic and intimate. And I think that is the core of what our species needs to get through. You know, it's a pretty difficult time in this society that we've created for ourselves.
Yeah, thank you. I want to find, and maybe one of my colleagues can bring up this, it's a TED talk on the grandmother bench, if that rings true with anybody, but it's about bringing peer support to a place where there were very few mental health professionals, and this idea of training the grandmothers to sit on a bench nearby and talk about it.
A few other pieces that just like really quick pieces about community as a community conversation. I think with community comes a feeling of belonging, and we are humans that crave belonging. We crave acceptance. We crave to feel like we fit in and we're safe somewhere. And in combination with that, I think since this is also like a Burning Man event, Burning Man has its community. It is a community of people who have similar values, lifestyle choices, ways of engaging with one another, and that in itself, I think, lends to, you know, if you, for example, if you identify as a burner, if you identify as part of the Burning Man community, you have something there. You have people who you can reach out to and say, you know that thing in the desert? Yeah, I know that thing in the desert, but we don't have to talk about it much more than that, other than share, you know, maybe whatever our memories are. But the idea that we're all relating to something that might be beyond, like, how do you explain psychedelics to someone who hasn't had psychedelics? How do you explain Burning Man to someone who hasn't been to Burning Man? There's like these aspects of profoundness that we share with one another that ties us together in this way. And I kind of just wanted to drop those in the bucket.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Yeah, I think that's one of, you know, one of the biggest pieces I would encourage if you're looking for community is like, what are those values or even hobbies, man? I'll just share it this way. My folks pulled some stuff out of their garage a few years ago, and I reconnected with one of my favorite childhood toys, which was Legos. And I was just like, oh, this is such a fun little creative. And I was like, oh, I'm too old to be playing with this. And this is super geeky. And then, dear Lord, the amount of people that are into Legos. I mean, the community for that. So it's like, the cool thing is, in this day and age with the internet, kind of whatever you're into, you could probably find somebody. They might not live next door, but they exist in the world. And so the more that you can kind of find that, and then again, I think not just the values and those shared kind of experiences, but it's good to have the discernment too, right? To just be like, I think that's just something that naturally happens at Burning Man, where it's like a conversation or a camp that you're like, ooh, what's this? Let's pedal over to those bright lights or that fun music. And you're like, let's get the heck away from that. That's not the vibe I'm looking for tonight. So, you know, again, let your intuition guide. I mean, I think that is another maybe 2-hour webinar on its own, and that I want to acknowledge my own feelings in. Like, my mind often masquerades as my intuition. I think we could do a lot better job getting more in our bodies and our hearts as human beings, but to really listen to those things when the alarms are going off. That's either saying, hey, maybe this person isn't quite safe for me, or maybe this person, there's some deeper resonance here that I should really like get through my own brainy stuff and actually drop in here and be present with this person. Because I think we're at an age, you know, we are on this planet where the solution is not going to be one person coming forward and saving humanity. It's going to be us as humanity saving ourselves and reminding each other what we're capable of. I know these are some dark times, folks, but I really, really have faith in the human heart and ingenuity, and that we can do some amazing things. It's just our collective values. We just we just a slight shift of where we're heading. I think we can pull off some miracles. So, and I've seen these other three pull off some pretty awesome miracles in the Zendo Project and beyond. So thank you all for being part of this community. And I know we're getting towards the end of time, but before we do, I'm okay to go a few minutes over. I'm curious if there's anything else that folks want to share to just wrap up or feel more complete here.
I think I'll just share gratitude, gratitude that we were able to come together and have this discussion. I love every time we all get together. I wish there was more opportunity for that. I also want to send gratitude to those who paved the pathways, came before us, shared their wisdom. And then thank you to everyone who attended.
Want to echo that and add in gratitude for these medicines and how they've gotten us this far, and kind of like how we were talking about, we don't know where we're going. We're going through it, and sometimes it's confusing and overwhelming, but trusting that, we do have some tools at our disposal. They're ancient tools. They've been helpful for our biology and our communities for a long time, and always showing gratitude for the spirit of the medicines as well.
Thank you all, and so much love to you. And thank you for all who viewed or going to view. And just definitely follow your intuition, your heart, and you're not alone.
Yeah, so much gratitude to all that came before us, to these medicines, to all this audience, to all the folks that are watching after the fact. They're seeing this as recordings. Just, this blessing to not only who you are, but all the amazing lives and hearts that have touched you. Your family, your friends, your teachers, your mentors, even your tormentors, even the antagonists that were maybe not making life so easy for you. Yeah, this amazing web. Stick around, folks. And I'm not saying on this webinar, I mean like on this planet. I know it's easy to want to check out in so many ways, and we need you all. We need your hearts. We need your genius. We need there are gifts that you are bringing, and we need them here now. So find them, find the way to bring them in a way that feels fulfilling and that feels like you're here being fulfilled and living your thing. So yeah, and when the time is right, come join us at Zendo. Love to have you. Always looking for amazing volunteers, folks to do this. Take our ideas, bring them out in the world in your own grassroots way. Reach out to zendo@maps.org, and we can continue the conversations about how to get involved or where we can consult or inspire or connect you to other communities. So once again, Adam, thank you. Brooke, thank you. Liz, thank you. So much blessing to you and your families and your friends and your communities where you sit and lay your heads at night. So much love and respect for all of you. Thank you for being a part of this journey.
Right back at you, Ryan.
All right. We'll see you all for the next time. And yeah, thanks again. Have a great night, everyone.